Hey everybody, Alex Newman here with the New American, and obviously there's a lot of concern about the direction that our nation is moving in. We see the Democrats in Congress quickly moving to solidify their power on the elections, on immigration, on amnesty, on all these different fronts. And with us today, we have somebody who spent a lot of time thinking about all this. His name is Bruce Abramson. He's got a PhD in computer science. He's also a lawyer. And he wears a lot of hats. One of the things he does is serve as the director and senior fellow at the American Center for Education and Knowledge. And we have him on today because he has just released, or is about to release, an incredible new book. It's called The New Civil War. Exposing elites, fighting utopian leftism, and restoring America. Bruce, this whole concept of a new civil war, I keep hearing this. What do you mean by a new civil war? And thanks for being with us.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Alex. Look, first thing is, first question you got to ask yourself is when does a society break up into a civil war? And the answer is there are two things out there. One is you need at least two factions with differing views of reality, different value systems, essentially incompatible views of ethics, economics, and politics. The second thing you need is a lack of trust in the mechanisms for peaceful dispute resolution. Right? In our society, the way that we usually resolve disputes peacefully is through the courts at elections. Right? Um, but those are rapidly eroding trust. And quite frankly, when we look across the divide, the progressive movement has a completely different set of values than we do.
Yeah.
When you talk about the predicates for a civil war, we're there. Where a country split between two different ethical systems and the trust in our mechanisms for peaceful dispute resolution is eroding. And that's what I see coming.
Yeah, so you mentioned that people are losing trust. In the 2020 election, that became very clear. Even the media's own polling data shows most Republicans, the overwhelming majority of Republicans, don't believe the election was fair, and even a lot of Democrats think it was stolen. And then, of course, the issue of the courts as well. So, what are the different? I guess we're kind of at a fork in the road here. What are the different options, and which do you see as most likely? I noticed in the presser, you called conservatives the kind of the new counter-revolutionaries. Are we really dealing with a revolution here? And is it going to be successful? Can we turn it around, or where do we go from here?
Okay, so we are entirely dealing with a revolution. First of all, and this may surprise people, but the United States is no longer a constitutional republic. I mean, we're just not living in one. Go down the list. Right, what constitutes a constitutional republic? Rule of law, not when governors can simply announce that they've decided that some non-essential activities are banned. Um, Due process. Well, I mean, we just saw a jury trial held with a mob outside saying, if we don't like the outcome, we'll get violence. And that's touted as great justice. Well, I got news for you. If there's a lynch mob forming outside the courthouse, justice cannot be served, even if the verdict is completely correct. Equal protection, not a chance. I mean, look at, we had a bunch of trespassers held in isolation for 4 months because they affiliate with the political right, and rioters that burned down cities all last summer is walking free. Uh, freedom to exercise religion has been under attack for well over a decade. There are credible threats to freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and the right to bear arms coming from both outside and inside our government. We've got a political movement in this country. The Democrats are trying to change the rules in the Senate so that they can change the rules on elections, federalize the electoral process. We got courts that simply don't want to get involved. This is not, you can go down a list. I don't know what makes this a constitutional republic anymore. So, yeah, we've got a revolution.
Yeah, that's a frightening prospect. And I know you're not calling for a civil war, but do you really think this could turn into like an actual civil war, like with guns and all that horrifying things that nobody would like to see, I assume?
Okay, so first of all, and I talk about this in the book, American exceptionalism will give us an exceptional civil war. and
Yeah.
we already see it. Okay, we already see it. And if you think about what scares Americans, okay, I mean, what really scares Americans scares you, your friends, your family members. People are less afraid that somebody's going to break into their home and shoot them in the middle of the night than they are that they're going to lose their job, be unable to pay their mortgage, have their credit rating destroyed, get their kids kicked out of school. I mean, this is what scares us. And those attacks are already underway. What's more, I mean, I don't like it when people say, am I predicting that violence will begin? Violence started the summer of 2013. For the past 7.5 years, intermittent, politically motivated street riots and violence have been part of the urban landscape of this country. Okay, so it's already started, it's already here, and it's been going on for 7.5 years. It was rampant last summer. Do I think that it will continue getting worse? Yes. Do I think that it will trigger a backlash at some point? Yes. But I still think that the bulk of our civil war will be on personal destruction rather than killing people.
Well, I guess that's some small comfort in these times. But so what's the most sensible way for conservatives who want to avoid this kind of fundamental transformation of our country, this escalation of violence? Is there a reasonable, peaceful strategy for trying to put us back on the right track, for trying to restore the constitutional republic, or are we too far gone? And if there is a way, what do you recommend that average conservatives, moms, dads, business people, how do we get back to some sense of sanity if it's possible?
All right. So, first of all, I don't believe that we're too far gone. I mean, people forget France started on its Republican venture the same time we did, and they're up to their fifth republic. So, just because I say that the American Republic has fallen doesn't mean we can't have a second American Republic. We absolutely can, and it can happen within a few short years. That doesn't mean it will. The entire book is about the nonviolent strategy. Right? And the nonviolent strategy starts with an observation. This is a critical lesson that we should have known all along, but if not, we clearly learned from Iraq. If you want to have a republic, you need a excuse me, you need a critical mass of your population to want a republic. Right? I mean, if the Bush administration marched into Iraq and said, "Hey, look, guys, we're getting rid of the totalitarian dictator. You can have a republic now." Why didn't it work? Because not enough people in Iraq wanted that. And the key to wanting a republic is not this notion of we all yearn to be free. Of course, we all yearn to be free. Who cares? If you want a republic, if you want to live in a free country, you need to want it. You want your neighbors to be free to make immoral, stupid, annoying, antisocial decisions. Okay? That's the key to a free society. Now, can we get there? We can get there nonviolently through the only mechanism we have that's nonviolent, and that is persuasion. And I spend a lot of the book talking about practical techniques for persuasion because I believe that we're facing two threats. The first is a truly evil ideological movement in the Marxist tradition and a leftist tradition. It's called progressivism. And we can talk about progressive ideology. That's a very loud movement. It's a very powerful movement. It's a movement of the elite. It's not a very big movement. Then you've got a second group. I call them social progressives, but they're basically people who sign up for progressivism without understanding what it means. They think being a progressive is the same as saying I'm a decent person. Right? Depending on where you come from, it might be, I'm a mensch, okay, which is Yiddish, literally means man. Plenty of women consider themselves mensches. You go down south, people will be told I'm a good Christian. Well, I'm Jewish. I'm not any kind of Christian. But it doesn't mean I can't be a good Christian, right? That's what they think progressive means. They are on there because they see professional benefits, they see personal benefits. They think it means being a good person. They fall and prey. They're terrified into being progressives, which is, I think, what describes most of the minorities. We have to persuade these people, and that's the only way to do it. That's how we get our supermajority.
So give us some examples. What would it look like to try to persuade some of these people? I mean, I guess the really ideological, hardcore progressives that really have bought into this, they may be beyond reach, but how would you get just a normal person who kind of got sucked into this, not realizing the implications? What would you say to persuade them?
Right. Well, first of all, I have to be open to it. You can't persuade anybody who's not open to listening. But
Yeah.
the way in is by hitting close to home. Right. It turns out that most of these social progressives um, are pretty well versed in something. Either it hits them professionally or it hits close to home, and they know that progressivism is wrong on the issue they know best. Right? Being a New Yorker, I know plenty of people who consider themselves progressives. They'll tell you that progressives don't understand economics and finance.
Okay.
Okay? Jewish progressives will tell you that they can't figure out why progressivism is rabidly anti-Israel and verging on anti-Semitism, which, by the way, I think is a generous way of putting it, but that's what they'll tell you. These are the people, and I grew up with many of them, who will tell you that the New York Times does a fine job of reporting everything except Israel, where it's terribly biased. Okay.
Mm.
I even had a friend who was a progressive activist who got involved. I mean, spent a large part of his career trying to do education reform. Wrote articles saying, "I don't understand why progressives just can't see that school choice is the solution, and the teachers' union is the problem." Um, Poll after poll after poll of minority voters, particularly black voters living in black communities that vote overwhelmingly for Democrats, will tell you right now they don't want police funding cut. They want their streets safe. So the way in is to go to the things that hit home and to open them up to the possibility that progressivism in general is no better on the issues they don't really know than it is on the one they know best. That's
Oh,
your
that
angle.
is fascinating. Yeah, that's a really interesting approach. And you touched on education, and I know you deal with this some in some of the hats that you wear. What role do you think the public school system is playing in kind of feeding this polarization, and also in getting a lot of our young people to adopt these progressive ideas without necessarily fully understanding them? And what do you think is the way out of this?
Um, so the way out of it is tough. Absolutely, the public schools are feeding this. You've got states taking the lead and trying to ban critical race theory, which is terrible theory. I mean, the way that you get back into it is by promoting pro-American civics education. But what I actually talk about is I trace the origins of this to higher education, to academia, and it turns out the way that you succeed in academia is by building upon the work of whoever came before you. Right? And that's well known. Now, what does that mean? That means that at some point somebody picked a direction that the field should go, and you go one half step further. Right? This is an incentive system that I call incremental outrageousness. Right? And it says that you win as an academic by pushing your field a half step further along whatever tangent it's taken. Um, and I show in the book how that has worked its way out of academia into media and basically across all of society through social media. Right? Here's a quick example. You start back about 75, 80 years ago when somebody says, we spend a lot of time studying history from the perspective of the nobility and the winners. What if we thought about it from the perspective of the peasants or the losers? Well, that's a great question. That's a great insight. Fast forward that along the same track a couple of decades, and we get to your sympathies lie with whoever's perspective you're taking. So if you're studying history from the perspective of the victors, you obviously favor the oppressor over the oppressed. Fast forward that another couple of decades, and where are you? All human interaction is a struggle between the oppressor and the oppressed. Bring it forward to today, and we discover that it's been scientifically proven that the nuclear family is a tool of oppression. Okay, that's where we are. It's a matter of unwinding all of this. But yes, I mean, we need state legislatures to jump in and prohibit this stuff from being taught, because otherwise the textbook publishers won't publish accordingly.
Yeah, Very, very good points there. And so, one of the people who collaborated with you on this new book is Trump's former strategist, Sebastian Gorka, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. And I think a lot of kind of conservative-minded, flyover country Americans really thought Trump was going to be able to change course, right? Get America off the
Yeah.
path it was on, and back to some sense of sanity. And yet now it seems like we're further down this road to crazy town than we've ever been before. What does Sebastian say, and where did we go wrong? Where did the Trump administration fail, and how can future leaders of this movement say do something differently so that we don't end up more polarized and further down the road?
Well, Seb left the administration because he thought that the people he most liked were being rotated out of positions of authority, and there were people coming in whose work he didn't support. And that, I think, is a general observation that many of us who were huge Trump supporters were critical from day one of his personnel policy. He simply kept in too many holdovers and too many careerists and brought in too many people from factions of the Republican Party that wanted to restrain him. And that was a huge problem. The metaphor that I use, and it's actually in an article I have out today on Real Clear Politics, but Trump committed a cardinal sin of a real estate developer. And that is, he built America into a beautiful, gleaming glass skyscraper, but he forgot to check the foundation. And you know what happens when you build a Trump Tower in a swamp? It sinks. And that's what we're witnessing. Okay, Trump did a great job at Make America Great Again. He did not do a good job at Drain the Swamp. And that's what we need, because otherwise the foundation isn't there.
What does it look like to drain the swamp? What could he have done differently?
First of all, he should have had better personnel policy. Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, he should have brought in people who actually went through the personnel, the career personnel, and got rid of those who or got rid of those who were fighting against it, or rotated them out of power. He should have had chiefs of staff and advisors and cabinet secretaries who really supported his agenda. And I mean, you saw it actually where he had pockets of excellence. Pompeo was great. Big fan of Rick Grinnell. I thought Betsy DeVos did a good job in education. Um, uh, you know, After that, it kind of runs thin. I actually thought Nikki Haley was among the very best UN representatives we've seen, up there with Jean Kirkpatrick and Pat Moynihan. She really made America proud. But it was thin pickings after that.
Yeah, yeah, I think a lot of people out there were wondering what was going on with some of these personnel decisions, and it does seem like that played a big role in some of the problems that we saw. In the last couple of minutes that we have left, Bruce, I know it's terribly difficult to make predictions about the future, but what do you think are some of the more likely scenarios here? Do you think we're going to end up more divided? I mean, you mentioned you thought the violence was going to continue. I mean, do you think this could reach a critical mass where things start getting really difficult? We start seeing, violence spilling into the suburbs. Do you think there's a decent chance that we can turn it around? I know you said you didn't think it was too late necessarily, but what do you think are some of the most likely scenarios? Where do we go from here?
Well, I mean, I think the most likely scenario is there's no reason that this violence should stop because it's working. I
Yeah.
mean, this is a successful tactic. So until I mean, it is really a matter of things will get worse until the Democrats who are not um, or are not ideologically aligned with the progressives stand up to them. And I don't necessarily mean the politicians; I mean the voters.
Mhm.
Okay? When the voters who supported Joe Biden because they thought that it was a return to moderation and normalcy realize that they've been played, things will start getting better. Until then, they will only get worse.
But so you do see a point at some point in the future where things will start turning around and improve and it'll get better?
Well, I hope so, but as with everything else, I mean, turning points are always difficult. Right? I mean, the left has been doing outrageous things that have been working. and they're going to
Yeah.
keep doing them until there's a pushback. And the moment of pushback, it's going to look really bad, but it'll start us back on the path of things that are better.
Excellent. Bruce, and where can people find your book? I know it's not quite out yet, but can
Right.
people pre-order it? What's the best place to find it?
If you go to brucedabramson.com, you'll find all the links to pre-order the book, as well as more information about me and my work.
Excellent. Well, Bruce, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for sounding the alarm about these troubling times that we're in. We appreciate it very much. Folks, it's Alex Newman
Thank you, Alex.
watching The New American. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Come back for more. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks again.